Hello and welcome to Barry's Economics. Today I'm going to be talking about a deep core bias that is both stopping a wealth tax and also causes politicians to dismiss evidence of inequality. So, to talk about bias today, I want to use a recent example. Gary Stevenson's appearance on the Rest is Politics podcast. And I want to look at this interview because I've rarely seen a clearer example of bias in action. For those of you that don't know, Gary Stevenson is a former Citibank trader. He's trained at the London School of Economics, and now he uses that expertise to explain how economic policy is essentially wrecking our economies and driving inequality. And The Rest is Politics, in case you don't know, is a hugely successful podcast hosted by essentially centrist experts. And its brand, its very brand, is for a voice of like sensible, realistic, real-world politics. One presenter, Roy Stewart, comes from the right of politics, and one presenter, Alistair Campbell, comes from the left of politics. The podcast draws a lot of praise from people who like to think of themselves as both moderate and rational. And that's why this is such a powerful example of how deep this bias runs. So let's dive into their interview with Gary.
Tell us a little bit about what you make of Labour. What do you make of Rachel Reeves? What do you make of Keir Starmer? What do you make of what they're up to?
So, I don't directly lobby the politicians because I think that I was writing for The Guardian and I switched to doing the YouTube because I thought that the fact that I look how I do and sound how I do will make the working class want to listen to me. But that same thing is a disadvantage when I talk to economists, when I talk to academics, when I talk to politicians, when I talk to be honest, a lot of the media until it's becoming popular. So I don't lobby them directly, but I work with people who do. Yeah.
My honest response is that it feels like you're getting a party political broadcast. You've taken on the tone of somebody who's like addressing millions of people and whipping them up.
As part of politics.
And my guess is if you wanted to engage with politicians, you could. I don't think you need to conclude that the reason...
100%.
I don't think the reason people aren't listening to you is that you've got an East End accent for a moment, right? These people come from backgrounds, most of them poorer than yours. They grew up in families poorer than yours, most of the Labour cabinet.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be impressed or worried by your accent, and I think you're overplaying that. I think your class anger is not letting you see some of the realities of politics.
So did you hear Rory's analysis there? Class anger. What's interesting to me is that when I hear Gary talk, I don't hear anger. I hear passion, I hear urgency, and I hear a very normal level of frustration that comes when you present evidence repeatedly and it gets ignored. Gary doesn't rant about class. I don't think I've ever heard him talk about class, certainly not in a ranty, angry way that you would associate with the idea of class anger. He gives clear economic arguments. So why does Rory hear class anger? A clue, I think, lies in their different backgrounds. So when Gary talks about inequality, he talks about it with urgency, and that's because he's got direct experience of it. Because it's touched his life and it's touched the lives of the people around him. He's seen up close the devastating effects of inequality. Rory, by contrast, has grown up never having experienced financial inequality in any direct way. His background is he went to Eton. His father was head of MI6, which is extraordinary really because this isn't an episode of Slow Horses. This is the real world. So he had a safety net. He was never at the sharp end of inequality. He was financially secure. So inequality was never a direct experience for Rory or anyone he grew up with. Inequality was, in effect, theoretical. It was an idea. It's just one of the white papers, one of the dry ideas in order to help society. Which means that when they talk about it, they're talking about it from a much more dispassionate and distanced way. It's never going to affect them because they're fine. They've got a safety net, they've got land, they've got property, or whatever they've got that allows them to be able to afford to go to Eton and have the background that they have. So policies like a wealth tax, there's no emotional connection to it. And there's certainly less urgency. So for somebody like Rory, who lives in the world of measures, calm, theoretical policy, Gary's urgency doesn't sound like urgency. To Rory, it sounds like anger. Now, there's also an even deeper issue here that we know from extensive research. So people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds tend to be far more attuned to emotion. They talk with more emotion, and studies show that they even read emotion more sensitively on people's faces. And the reason for this is because they don't have a financial safety net. Social bonds are far more important for survival. In fact, they're crucial for survival. So both socially and culturally, they are hardwired to read and express emotion. However, in elite settings, in well-off settings, because you have safety net, you have as much, you don't need people as much. And that means that you create a bit of distance because you've got the luxury of being able to do that. Yeah, people are annoying, aren't they? I mean, some of you are probably finding me annoying right now, and I'm not even in the room with you. Imagine having somebody else in the room with you. Right there. So the opportunity to be able to create distance and give themselves space actually changes their hardwiring. Culturally and socially, they are hardwired for both distance, that's emotional distance, and also physical distance. They get more of their own space. Sometimes 62-room mansions of their own space. So in higher socioeconomic groups, showing emotion or displaying emotion is often coded not just as wrong, but as bad, as unbalanced, and, crucially, low status, which means there's a reason to discount a person. So a bias creeps in. If you speak passionately, you must be angry. And if you're angry, you're less credible, you're not thinking rationally, and I should not listen to you. So, let's see how that plays out in the interview in real time. Next, Rory essentially kind of calls out Gary. He states in a way that kind of almost feels personal that Gary is patronizing clever people, and that's why nobody is listening to him. And Gary accepts that point, and he takes Rory's comments seriously, but not personally. And he attempts to explain the reason, the rationale behind his patronizing attitude towards elite economists.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be impressed or worried by your accent, and I think you're overplaying that. I think your class anger is not letting you see some of the realities of politics. I think what's more likely to be a problem is they don't appreciate being patronized, because they also feel they've done economics degrees, they've studied this stuff quite seriously, and you're talking to them like they're idiots. You're saying, I can tell you what's going to happen in 5 years. This is the way the world is.
This is a good point,
I
actually.
did economics. I'm smart at maths. And Rachel Reeves is like, I was a chess champion. I'm pretty smart at maths too. And she's going to be listening to this.
There's some important background here. Listen, let me say what happened when I went to Oxford, right? I went back to Oxford. We had the lecture on interest rates. And I was, at that point, one of the most successful interest rate traders in the world. And we had, at that point, incorrectly predicted that interest rates would go back up 10 years in a row. And I went to him and said, why do you think we're so bad at predicting interest rates? This is an Oxford macroeconomics professor. He said, no, you're wrong. We always knew rates would stay zero for 10 years. This is in 2017. That's just categorically wrong. I was quite shocked, and I tried to explain to him that was wrong. I said, okay, I'm going to send you the data. I went back, I sent him the data. He said, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. We have been wrong. We have mispredicted interest rates. We have mispredicted the strength of the broad economy for 10 years. That was it. He wasn't interested in talking. These guys have been wrong on the big economic issue of our time for 10 years in a row. This guy hadn't even noticed. These guys are so bad, they are unable to recognize that they are bad. I cannot explain to you how serious this situation is. Listen, I know I do patronize them, but the truth is they're terrible. They're terrible, and the world's falling apart, and they themselves get rich while it happens. So yeah, I am angry.
But the professors of economics at Oxford are not getting rich while it happens.
They get about 40
You're confusing two different types of resentment. Look, on
not.
the one hand, you've got a model where there's like the super billionaires who are buying seven houses.
You think the professors
and
at
on the
Oxford
other,
are not rich?
Well, no, wait. You're doing two different things. On the one hand, you're like the people who become professors are losers who couldn't get a job in a bank. And if they had been smarter, they would have got a job in a bank.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there are different narratives. They're all got the same narrative, which is,
No, but the thing,
I'm angry,
these
I'm
guys,
working class,
these
and these
guys who
guys
become professors,
are rich and ignorant.
they don't
right?
make a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
They are there because they don't need the money. They come from rich families. They come from rich families, Rory. They don't need the money.
So in response to Rory's question there, Gary's offered a stark example of essentially elite blindness, like how even a top macroeconomics professor at the UK's very top university is dangerously out of touch with real-world economic reality. And do you see that Rory, he doesn't even hear it. If he'd listened to what Gary had said, he'd concede something. But Rory's pre-written internal story about Gary's class anger actually blinds him to the outrageous fact that Gary has just related to him, that elite institutions are missing the economic reality of everyday people and they're not even aware of it. Instead, Rory takes issue with defending the wealth or monetary situation of Oxford professors. But Rory jumped into that point, so why is Rory taking it so personally? Firstly, it's Rory's expectation of what he thinks Gary is going to say. He's already got that written in his own head.
Yeah.
And so there are different narratives. They're all got the same narrative, which is,
No, but the thing,
I'm angry,
these
I'm
guys,
working class, and
these guys who
are
become professors,
are rich and ignorant.
they don't
He
make...
restates his point about class anger, that narrative that he's got in his head, even saying that all of Gary's arguments are about class anger, which is, again, I really struggle to see the evidence for that. Also, and forgive me for this, Rory, but I do have to name it, Rory does work for elite institutions. He works for Yale. He's got a lot of vested interest and probably a lot of affection for people like Oxford professors. But it's certainly going to be a bias when it feels like Gary is attacking the very institutions that Rory works for, gets paid for. And again in the interview, you can see Rory responding not to what Gary is saying, but responding to how Gary is saying it, and also who Gary is saying it about. And those biases ramp up even more as the interview concludes. Have a watch.
My last question. There's a lot of things going on. I mean, you're making observations about psychology, lack of kindness and care in the home, structural inequalities of wealth, class, masculinity. Do you ever worry that some of these things are getting overlapped and overlaid in your mind so that anger, class, family backgrounds, school, masculinity are feeding in ways which are misleading you? That if you kind of got back to your kind of self at LSE, trying to look at how you frame economic policy, that you might want to take a bit of a step back from that degree of kind of...
It's an incredible thing to say, isn't it? To not just the person that you've invited into your podcast, but also is an expert on economics, has a bestseller about economics, and you're essentially saying maybe all of the issues are getting mixed in your head and you should go back to economics school. But leaving that aside, to reinforce the point that Gary, he's taking it seriously and not personally. He even takes that, what I would consider a kind of like personal attack. He tries to answer in good faith what Rory has just asked him. How do you make sure that all the things in your head are not baffling you or confusing you? How do you keep yourself grounded? And this is how he answers that.
From that degree of kind of...
I do worry about that. I do worry about that. And then that's why I still trade. That's why I still trade. Listen, you want to be a good trader, you want to make money every year, you haven't got no space for emotional biases. You got to be right. 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 And I make money every year. I keep betting. I keep winning. The truth is, the best paid 10,000 economists in the world, they are all traders. And I'm the only one that's going to speak to you because they get paid not to speak to you. I keep trading. I keep betting. I keep winning. I think I'm good at this. I think I'm right at this. And I think I'm going to keep being right.
As humans, we can get tangled up in our own narratives, our own biases. And this is how I stay tethered to the real world. By trading, where being wrong costs real money. There are stakes, it's high risk, and the market's forced you to test your ideas against reality. That's how I stay grounded, which suggests a reversal. And I'd like to ask Rory this. directly. If your background primes you to prioritize restraint, status, and manner over substance, especially around areas of wealth, disadvantage, and inequality, and it stops you questioning elite institutions, what are you doing to actually hear the argument when it arrives on your doorstep with passion and urgency? And that's key, because if Rory is dismissing what Gary says because of the way he's saying it, and I like Rory, I actually like him, I think he's trying his best, I think he's a public servant in the very best sense of the word. But if it's happening to Gary, an elite economist, on this, a rational, moderate, centrist podcast by somebody that's trying their best, like Rory, where else is that bias happening? Because it's going to be much worse in other places, you'd expect. But I'm not doing this video to shame the rest of his politics. Well, maybe I am, just a touch, just a little bit. It's because I expect better from you. You've let yourself down, you've let us down. Yeah. But I'm doing this to name the bias.
So there are different narratives. They're all got the same narrative, which is,
No, but the thing,
I'm angry,
these
I'm
guys,
working class,
these
and
guys who
are
become professors,
are rich and ignorant.
Because this has to be about naming the bias so we can fix it. Because we can't argue bias away in just one big video or speech, but we have to chip away at it from every single side. So this is what you do with bias. First, you name it. If you can't see bias, you can't fight it. And language makes the invisible visible. If you see it, name it. Second, break the bubble. So talk to real people outside your circle, which softens prejudice faster than any statistic will. Because often people aren't listening to the statistics because they're too obsessed with their own idea of how you're sounding, whether you might be angry or not.
I think your class anger is not letting you see some of the realities of politics.
Third, slow it down. Bias thrives in snap judgments, and you can see that in the interview. Like calming down forces the brain to think and not stereotype. And finally, shift the culture. And the more that we talk about bias means that we're not taking things personally, but we're taking things seriously. Because often the people that are showing bias, and it can feel very, very difficult when they're accusing you of things that you've never said or they're not listening to you, it's not really their fault. They just don't see their own bias. So having a story about bias is hugely important to changing the whole story about the structure and the framework of where the problems are. And that's how bias falls, not through like one silver bullet, but through pressure, persistence, and persistence, and persistence, and community, sharing the story, changing the story. Or as I like to say it, please, if you see inequality, report it to the British Inequality Police. See it, say it, sorted. That's my saying. I just nicked it from Network Rail. But it's about bias. I think you see what I did there. Anyway, thanks for watching. As I say, this is a different video for me, so let me know what you think. Did you like this? I've also got a longer one that I could do about the whole interview, and you'd like to see an even more detailed breakdown of that interview because there are a few other things that came out, then let me know in the comments, and if there's enough desire for it, I'll do that as well. But thank you very much for watching and being part of a community that's trying to change the story, because it happens bit by bit, and it happens in places like this.